has made the way for me.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Believer's Voice of Victory broadcast. I'm Courtney, the granddaughter of Kenneth and Gloria Copeland, and today I'm sitting with one of my dear friends, Grant Skeldon, and everyone knows and loves Greg Stephens. And today we're continuing the conversation about multi-generational impact, discipleship, and what are we talking about today?
So today we're talking about just kind of this project I've been on of just focusing on, instead of what's wrong with the next generation, asking the question, what's working? And I get the privilege of having these like young leaders that we kind of do private retreats for and make sure they're healthy, that they live with conviction, and that they're excellent at what they do. They say leadership is lonely often. And so we want to make sure these young leaders who are growing in their faith, that they finish well, that they could finish the good race, if you will. And all that to say, as I get to be around these speakers, authors, musicians, nonprofit leaders, pro athletes, and they're 20-somethings, 30-somethings, strong Christians, stewarding a lot of influence, I started paying attention to like what happened in their story that made them end up where they are in a world and in a time when we're like seeing so many young people leaving the church. They became leaders on behalf of the church. And there's a couple things that I've seen that also we see in a lot of Bible stories with young people that develop them into the leader they are today.
I have a question for you, Grant. There are some churches, let's say there's a transition that's happening in leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And some churches say, we want to go younger. Is just simply going younger the answer to growth and moving forward?
No, definitely not. In fact, we're in the challenge of not having the older generation of my church. We are a church plant. We're 2 years old. I'm one of the older people. And so ironically, I'm so passionate about discipleship. But when I'm trying to teach our church on it, when you walk into a church, and we walk into any room, but especially you walk into a church, you're checking it out, you're usually looking like, are these my people? Is there anyone else that kind of like looks like me here? People that are in the same stage of life. Because if you join a small group, you join a church and you're constantly with people in a very different stage of life, it's not impossible. It's just there's something of being able to relate to like, okay, we're all navigating some of the same seasons and we're looking for God's word and wisdom in that season. And so I actually think our challenge is, man, we want wisdom, but we don't have too many people to ask. And so I don't think the answer is just go young. I don't think it's throwing the baby out with the bathwater, if you will. I really do think the best version of the church is when we are united and together.
Okay, take us on that journey then.
Yeah. So, I really want to focus on something that I've found in when I see just amazing relationships among an older generation person and a younger generation person, and that young person becomes an amazing leader. Like they're humble, they're hungry, they're godly, they're in God's word. Often I'm seeing this trend where they often had someone older at a young age, like kind of put their neck on the line to invest in them, to believe in them, to really kind of give them a shot. One of them is they will give them, I would call it a ridiculous responsibility. I'd love to ask you, I'm sure of it. I actually, both y'all, if you would share, is like there's this time when one, someone speaks life into a gifting they have. Two, someone starts to say, hey, I'm in your corner. I want to help you. Somebody that doesn't have to be the same people, by the way. But three, a big one is they kind of get thrust into a responsibility where it kind of feels like the deep end. I don't know if it's, hey, you're going to preach tomorrow. I've seen that a lot for people in ministry. They're like, man, I was not ready. And then the senior pastor's like, you got it this Sunday. Mm-hmm. And I saw one pastor say, I stayed up all night studying. I was like, I wish I had weeks to prepare, but he was nervous, but it allowed him to get a little bit of an opportunity to figure out and learn his voice. And I've seen it in the military where it's like, hey, we're going to entrust you. I mean, if you think about it today, we entrust some young adults over multi-million-dollar equipment, big responsibilities overseas, but it's these stretching moments that Jesus definitely did with the disciples. They didn't seem always perfect for what they did. They kind of were stretched and matured.
It's okay if they fail.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I think it's in the moments that we fail that we see, man, God picks us back up. And it's, last thing I'll just say on this is think about the moments often where you're so clinging to God's word. You were seeing the promises of God. You were growing. You were like hungry for his word. It was often in these harder seasons of our life where we were being stretched. Ironically, if I ask anyone, hey, what seasons formed and forged you the most? It was often what would be considered harder seasons. We relied on the Lord like never before. But if I asked you, would you want to delete that season from your life? Would you want to erase that season from your story? They're like, no. I say, do you want to go back to that season? They're like, definitely not that either. So there's this tension of like, no, I don't want to go back, but I don't want to erase it. God was beautiful what he did there. And so I think these moments of stretching and trusting are huge.
Give me an example from scripture or from the Bible of where somebody did that. Like I call it throwing them in the deep end of the pool.
The deep end, yeah. Definitely, I think one of the unsung heroes in this category is Saul. Saul gets a lot of flack. He did do some and make some poor decisions at the end. But one thing I got to give Saul credit for is, David didn't have a lot of people who believed him in his early years. I mean, if you think about it, it's sad, but David's own dad didn't seem to believe in him in the sense that he didn't even let him be an option to be chosen by Samuel. Samuel comes by, he's got all these brothers, and he doesn't even let him get an option. He's not going to say, hey, you have to recommend David, but not even putting me out there as an option. If I was his son, I'd be like, man, what's wrong with me? Why can't I at least be potentially picked? But if I might have a chip on my shoulder of like, okay, my own dad doesn't even like believe in me like this. He sent me out to just be a shepherd. But then, and then second, his own brothers. If you remember, the only reason he's over in the battlefield is to bring some food to his brothers. And so even his brothers are like, why are you here? They seem to get a little frustrated with David. So if I was like, man, my dad doesn't seem to believe in me. My brothers seem to be a little frustrated with me. And then there's Saul. And this is a big thing is we think young people are leaving the church because we ask them to do too much. I actually think maybe we ask them to do too little.
Wow.
It's those who are stretched. I mean, Courtney's a great example of, I love the story you've shared earlier this week where your dad kind of is like, I'm going to put you in different departments of this church and we're going to stretch you. You're going to serve. You're going to get to learn like the holistic nature of what goes on here. But those are the moments that like form us in our faith. And all that to say, he gets to Saul, and this wasn't some small opportunity. This was huge. It was critical. Saul's neck was on the line. If David failed against Goliath, it wasn't like, oh, that's a whoopsie. That's like, we serve the Philistines. But he put his neck on the line. I gotta assume there was a humility in David. There was a authority. There was a hand of God that was clearly on David's life. But Saul put his neck on the line in such a major way, and I think it paid off. So there's something about when they come together that's really beautiful. But that's one of my favorite stories of Saul putting his neck on the line for David. Now the challenge is just quickly, then it's easy to compare. It's like, well, now he's getting his praise, and now he's getting his praises for raising up, started killing 10,000. And I think the big thing is sometimes we fall into the temptation where we're like, I want to raise God's name. And we don't always talk about this, but there's almost an unwritten rule of our heart we have to mature out of is we want to raise God's name, but sometimes subtly in our soul, we're like, I just hope I can raise my name while I raise his name. But the secret to it, I think, is to be instead like John is like, no, I want to decrease so that God can increase.
Matter of fact, I've got that right here.
Yeah, please pull
John, it up. In the Gospel of John, chapter 3, Jesus is coming now to be baptized. And in verse 30, John this is his cousin. They're 6 months apart in age. Mm-hmm. And John's got a big ministry. And some of John's disciples will follow Jesus right after this happens. Therefore, this joy of mine is fulfilled. Verse 30, he must increase, speaking of Jesus, but I must decrease.
Yeah.
And the maturity that he had to know his assignment, my assignment is to pave the way for him. Mm-hmm. And to realize that, and then let some of his disciples leave.
Yeah.
And go with Jesus. I mean, there's times I have to ask myself, I don't know if I could do that. But Jesus taught us, if I be lifted up, I'll draw all men unto me. And I think that's that stretching and maturity phase that we have to do.
Yeah.
So good.
What was the moment in your life where that happened to you? Someone put their neck on the line for you as a pastor, or as a professor, or when did that?
Well, it's happened several times. Once with Brother Hagin, and it was terrifying. We were on the road. We're in a church. I don't know these people. And he grabs me. The service is over. He grabs me and goes, come here, Greg. And he says, I want you to pray for this young man right here. He's 15, 16, 17 years old. And his mom's staying right there. And she's crying. She's desperate. And he goes, I've trained him. He's going to pray with you. And then I go to start to pray with him. Brother Hagin said, no, take him over in this room and pray with him. Mm-hmm. And so I take him over in the room real fast. Take him over in the room. And as I get ready to grab the young man's hands to pray for him, this voice comes out of him, right? And his eyes roll back. I'm like, oh my God, is this a demon? What is this? It terrified me. And it seemed like it took forever. And we finally, a bunch of us prayed and the guy got, saved and relieved. And I went to Brother Hagin and I looked at him. And the minute I walked in the door, he started laughing. And I go, did you know? And he goes, yeah. He goes, but that was just a little one, but it was something that he let me do. Another one is your grandfather. Just out of the blue one day, he says, tomorrow you're taping with me. And then in a ministers' conference, he did the same thing. He says, he called me on Monday night. Ministers' conference starts on Tuesday. It was Monday night. It was at dinner with some people. He says, you've got it tomorrow morning. You're preaching. I was like, I don't have time to prepare. Mm-hmm. But so those two generals of the faith that both did at my life, and I'm grateful for it. Yeah. So grateful.
Yeah. Well, you think about like Barnabas did this a bit with Saul too. I mean, it seems like for a couple of years, they were rightfully so. The Christians were scared of Saul. When Saul converted to Paul, they were like, this guy was literally killing us. Yeah. And it said for years he was learning, but he wasn't connected to the disciples until Barnabas. And Barnabas was like, I'm taking the disciples. And he introduced them, but he put his credibility on the line. And so that kind of one, sincerely, I honor like that you, as long as I've known you since day one, you've kind of been like, you've got ideas in your heart. You don't just like settle in one plateau. You're like, I want to bring fresh creativity and intentionality to what you do. To any work or project I've seen you do, that's been the case. Why do you think it's harder though for the older generation to maybe sometimes put their neck on the line? But then also, why do you think it's hard for young people to respond with wisdom and the intentionality that you brought often?
Yeah, that's a great question. Surprisingly to a lot of people, I actually have felt the least amount of resistance from my grandfather. I actually feel the most push from him. I remember one time, I brought this woman who he, is very close to our family, and she kept seizing. I was like, Papa, lay your hands on her, right now, she's seizing. He goes, you do it, and just walked off. And that was the first time that I felt, because she wanted him. Yeah. But his confidence in me and what I knew about the authority of the believer was enough. He just went about his way. And then another time that my grandfather really empowered me was I was kind of hosting a partner event in Chicago. And he goes, do you know about the cattle on 1,000 Hills? Who does it belong to? Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, technically God, but then we're seated at the right hand of the Father. So I guess technically us. He's like, perfect, go preach that in the offering. That's what my message is about tonight. And I was just like,
how old were you?
21. Yeah. And I never really spoke to that audience before. So I immediately felt really nervous and scared. And I went up there, I started preaching it. And he ended up coming up on the platform. So I'm like, dang it, I messed up. I thought he felt like he needed to correct me. And he was like, I'm just going to keep going. You set me up perfectly, and I'm just going to keep going from here. And then he just ended up preaching. I still to this day don't know if that was him trying to rescue me out of whatever I was probably saying wrong, or if it was just truly, such a learning.
Affirming you.
Maybe I can ask him and I can settle this in my heart. But he's definitely given me the least resistance of the creativity and the change that I've wanted to bring to the ministry. It's actually the people who work for him that have been doing the same thing for 30 years that I feel the most resistance against. And I know that they don't feel like they're against me, but it feels like I'm having to prove myself to them that maybe I'm gifted enough to lead us in a different direction. But I've never once felt that way with my grandfather.
And can I say it this way? I was sitting on the beach one day in California, and I was watching my kids in the surf, and I was watching the waves. And I heard the Lord speak to me, the greatest resistance to the new wave that's coming in is the previous wave going out. Mm-hmm. But if you'll learn, that's where the tension is that makes the wave that you can surf on. Yeah. So get above it and ride the wave. And I don't want to be the generation that resists God's new wave that's coming in. I don't think you do either. So how do we instill that into this audience that they will ride the wave rather than resist it?
It is a scary thing, though. Yeah, I just think we gotta acknowledge that it's what we know, and then and we know something needs to change, but who has the answers, and how could it? Like if you were the soldiers that have been there with Saul for 40 days of getting taunted by Goliath, yeah, you might be like, are you sure? Are you sure, Saul? Like, you're risking my life too. Like, you're risking all of it. So I think it's good to see, like, man, it's scary. But like, even with Moses, it's a bumpy road, and they're like, man, I think we should just go back. And it's to go and forge into the unfamiliar I don't think it's easy for any generation.
Before David got a crown, God gave him a giant.
Mm-hmm.
And before Moses ever had a country, he was in the wilderness.
Mm-hmm.
Before Joseph ever held court, he was in prison.
Yeah.
And so in all of these things, as he acknowledges you and you know you're called to something, know that there might be some time of testing, that there might be some time of where you're in the shadows. And I think it's how David behaved in the cave is what ultimately got him to the throne.
Yeah. I was just thinking about how Jesus, I mean, this idea of we're going to entrust this beautiful message and this huge responsibility to maybe not what people would pick as the first option has been the case since the beginning of like Jesus picked disciples that I don't think everyone today, and definitely anyone back then.
Were they plan B? Did he have a plan B?
I just know that these guys, I think it makes God look beautiful. I think it makes God look grand. I think it shows he's in charge. I mean, it's almost like we see with like Gideon to going around and we're going to blow trumpets. It's like God likes it when it's like, this just doesn't make sense how this works. And
when he's outnumbered.
He's outnumbered. It doesn't make sense, but he gets to show up in this huge way. And even with Daniel and the three that are like thrown into the fire, when God shows up, I mean, the king responds and it's like, man, this is God. In fact, we need to serve this God. And so I think those moments are really powerful. But last one, I mean, thing about Jesus, the main example we should be looking at is even Jesus. There's so many ways I've thought about how he maybe could have shared the gospel in a way that the whole world saw it. I mean, this is creative and it's an idea, but I was like, he could have written it on the moon. He had the kind of power to do that. He could have made us dream it. Like we hear Muslim brothers and sisters who are coming to Christ now, they have even dreams of seeing Jesus. Like there's so many ways that an omniscient, all-powerful God could have done it, but he chooses these disciples, not even the best Pharisees of the time or religious leaders. He picks these disciples. And by the way, because I think this is important, because you might be like, well, if I knew some amazing young leaders, I'd put my neck on the line. The disciples sometimes were some punks. Like they got it wrong sometimes.
They weren't the best of the best.
They weren't the best of the best. And it's not even like, well, sometimes we'll be like, well, they got to be an intern. And if they really, really prove themselves for a long time, then, and I think there's elements of, hey, make sure they're willing to do the small things before the big things. I want to make sure to credit that for sure. But it's not like just in the early years they were getting it wrong. Even in the later years. In the early years, they're asking for the left hand and the right hand of the Father. They're asking, hey, will you bring fire down from heaven to burn these people? They asked that to Jesus. This is immature prayer requests. They couldn't cast out the demons. But in the last days even, they're falling asleep while he's sweating blood. Mm-hmm. One of them cut off a guy's ear on the last days. Like that's not the best evangelism strategy, in my opinion. Right. They're denying him. To one of them even like abandoned him and left him and betrayed him. Mm-hmm. So it just shows like, man, relationships are messy. It is a risky thing, but it's something we keep seeing God do. And he chose these disciples and he's chosen us. Then he chose the Gentiles, even that. When Peter went to Cornelius, he was like, wait, what? This is, right. We're opening it up. So we're giving the gospel to these not first pick people in that time. They would think, man, it makes God look good. And then again, the early church persecuted and murdered and martyred, but it continues to grow and it just continues to show God is on the move. And I would say that today is like, it may look dim and dark, but like there's always darkness before the great revival. And I'm convinced that like God is on the move and he does use people like us to continue the gospel in today's world.
I've heard you describe a lot of these transformations as a linchpin moment.
Yeah.
Can you kind of explain that to us on the giving end and the receiving end? And how can we, these examples that you've just shared, how can we be on the receiving end of that and the giving end of that?
Yeah. So just these we kind of you named a couple moments, you named a couple moments. These are moments that were not sermons, but they were experiences that stick with us. They're like pebbles in our shoe. They when you talked about someone saying you're a leader, you start to even identify going forward as like, I'm a leader, I'm going to show up. Like, I've seen that from you. I've seen you have a leader mindset going into situations instead of just, hey, it is what it is, we just accept it like this. No, you're like, well, how do we make this a little bit better? And I think that's a God-given gift to do that. I think this is a funny story. I actually rarely share this, but you're talking about a great question. How does it work on both ends? Because I think a great relationship shouldn't be just a take. It should be like we give and we receive. And this is a random story, but I actually think when you invest a lot into the next generation, it may feel at first like a burden, but it should become a blessing. Like even in the early years, it seemed like Jesus, it wasn't easy. But in the long run, these disciples went on without him because of his investment, and his fruit continued even after him. Jesus himself said, you will go and do greater things. I think that's a sign of great investment, great leadership, is it multiplies. But, we're in Dallas right now, and there was a guy, Chad Hennings, he's a Dallas football player, and I was talking to him. He was kind of mentoring me a bit, and he told me the story about having a young puppy. If you guys remember, the Cowboys used to be good back in the day. And so if you remember back in the 90s, they were really good, and they won championships, but he was on that team. But he was saying, I was so busy, we were traveling, doing all this press and on the road and practice. And he's like, my kids were at home often. I come home and they're begging me, Dad, they're like children, we really want to get a dog. You're on the road a lot. Can we please get a dog? And he's like, I felt like I got to give them a dog. I'm out. So I get them a little puppy. And he said that puppy, at first, like young people, loose cannon, passionate, going to the bathroom, learning where to go to the bathroom, learn where the food is, learning not to chew up the couch. And then after a couple of years, the dog gets older. It starts to know the rules. It starts to get a little wiser. And he said then it got a lot older. In dog years, I think it was 10, 15, maybe 20 years old. But he said the dog was really slow, starting to feel like lethargic. He joked, he said, you know how when you open the door and someone new comes in the house, a lot of dogs, not all, but most dogs jump all over that person and start barking. He said the dog used to bark all the time. Now when a new person came over, he would be on his mat. He would look up and be like, what's up? And then just go back to sleep. And I tell you this story because what he said was interesting. This dog was coming to the end of its life. They went to the vet. They said, hey, this dog's probably not going to make it more than a year, maybe 2 max. And so the kids were like, hey, Dad, our dog's like older now. It's really kind of boring. It doesn't play with us anymore. So they said, hey, can we get a new dog? And so they got a new puppy. And the point of the story is that new puppy brought so much life out of that dog. Like the puppy wants to play. The puppy wanted to go eat. The puppy wanted to go outside. And they said, this true story is they said the little puppy got the dog to play again, to go outside. It was showing him where to go to the bathroom, where to eat, all these things. And they said the dog lives several more years, way more than the vet. The vet was surprised. And he joked, he said, I think it was because that little dog would not let the dog die. The puppy brought a new fresh wind of life
So you're talking
to that
about
dog.
refiring, not retiring.
Yeah.
People.
The way he said it was, you can teach an old dog new tricks. You can't teach an old dog new tricks, is the saying. He said, and I would say, but you can give an old dog a new purpose. And I think when you bring a new young person into life, I see this all the time when people start investing in the next gen, is it brings like a fresh wind and purpose to what God's doing in their story.
Beautiful.
That's so good. And I want to encourage you, if you feel like you don't know what your story is or you don't know what your purpose is, I want to encourage you to call our prayer line and let one of our trained, faith-filled prayer ministers pray with you over that. I think it's really cool when you have someone that you can just call at any point in time and say, I'm struggling with this. Yeah. Or you maybe heard this weeks of broadcast and you were like, I don't have any of that. I don't have community. I don't have a mentor or discipler. I don't have anyone to disciple, and you feel lonely. Call our prayer line. Let them pray with you. You don't have to do this alone. And thank you to our partners who make our prayer line free for anyone who calls. We're not going to ask you for money. We're going to pray with you. We're going to follow up with you. And we just want you to know that we love you. And I'm so honored that you took time to listen to what my good friend Grant here had to talk about. Greg, I love the points that you make. And I really hope that when people hear this, they're able to take it and apply it to themselves. And tomorrow we're going to even dive deeper another day. What are we talking about tomorrow?
Yeah, so tomorrow we're going to actually focus on how contagious it is, but especially attractive it is to the younger generation when those that have gone before them have just such a radical faith, even still.
I hope you enjoyed this. I'm Courtney, this is Grant Skeldon and Greg Stephens, and we're here to remind you that God loves you, we love you, and Jesus is Lord. I hope you enjoyed that episode. I'm so excited to introduce you to the redesigned Lifeline series by my grandparents, Kenneth and Gloria Copeland. When problems arise, having a go-to action plan to overcome those challenges is so vital. That's where the 6-part book series comes in. This is a comprehensive, word-based resource designed to help believers apply God's promises to real-life challenges. These books address the most common areas where believers desire breakthrough and lasting transformation. This package includes books on topics such as faith, healing, prayer, anxiety, finances, and relationships. You can buy one or the whole package. Rather than offering inspiration alone, this package equips believers with practical steps that encourage consistent faith action and spiritual growth. If you'd like to get your copies, you can visit our website or call the number on your screen today.
Get the Spiritual Action Plan package today for 1,029 Rand. Call or go online for new postage rate options. Go to kcm.org.za or phone on 0860-103356. You can also purchase each Spiritual Action Plan individually for 179 Rand. Whether you're believing for healing, restored relationships, financial breakthrough, freedom from anxiety, want to build your faith, or receive answers to prayer, be empowered to walk in God's will with confidence. Contact your regional office for more information.
You have a free resource to help you study and apply the Bible-based truths you just heard. Download the BVOV broadcast study notes today at kcm.org/notes. Collect the notes from each week and use them in a group Bible study. Use the message outline to teach from. Discuss the scriptures and key points with your family of believers. Gain understanding from all the teachings on the Believer's Voice of Victory broadcast. Get the whole week of notes today at kcm.org/notes.
Welcome to KCM.org, your study center for victory. Click Start Here to unlock answers on where to begin your faith journey. You'll find links to our most popular content and an overview of what KCM.org can do for you. Start there and don't stop exploring. Find a Bible-believing church home with the Find a Church feature. At KCM.org, we want to answer your questions, encourage you daily, and help lead you on the path to victory in your family, finances, emotional, and physical health. With things to watch, read, pray, and speak, KCM.org meets you where you are.
Thank you for joining us on the Believer's Voice of Victory. Kenneth and Gloria Copeland want you to be victorious in life. Go to kcm.org.za for free ministry resources and teaching tools to help you grow in faith and live in the blessing of the Lord. Stay connected with us through our website and Facebook channel to help us keep you informed and up to date on ministry outreaches, upcoming events, and specials that are available to you.